7 years old and they still play Sectic, and Sectic has Area 51 in their name? I just don't know. Now sure, it's not impossible that this is some random guy. It might be the most hardcore Sectic fan ever, sure. But let's keep going. Moving on to Area 51 Test's inventory, and this is where you might actually start to believe me that this account is owned by Homer. Looking at the Game Passes section of Area 51 Test's inventory, you'll find only 3 passes. 2 of them being from, you guessed it, Sectic, with the final pass also being made by Homer Mafia 1, for one of his other discontinued games known as Whomp's Fortress. Now, isn't it a bit suspicious that the only Game Passes that this account owns were created by Homer? If this was a real account, wouldn't they have lots of other Game Passes, maybe? What's a... Subject A. If you remember earlier on the iceberg, way back on layer 2, I briefly mentioned how written down on paper 12 within the Wendigo area computer room, the boss aberration is referred to as quote-unquote Subject B. We know this due to the mention of hate also within the paper, and so far aberration is the only confirmed entity within Sectic, besides the corrupted ones, who have been confirmed to be infected with the said substance, meaning Subject B has to be her. But what about Subject A? I mean, if there's a Subject B, there's gotta be a Subject A, right? I mean, it just makes so much sense. Well, you might assume that Subject A has never been mentioned in Sectic ever, but that's where you're actually wrong. You see, back when Aberration had her own media location, again like we mentioned earlier, there was a paper that was present around that area that had its contents completely changed when it was eventually added back to the game. This paper being known simply as Paper 7. Nowadays, Paper 7 is found in the sewer meeting room, and it just basically talks about how a meeting was held on the 18th of May 1957 about Cleaner 2. Yeah, it's pretty boring, it doesn't give us that much lore information at all. However, before the sewer expansion update and the paper was rewritten and repurposed, Paper 7 could be found behind the elevator in the old Aberrations containment area and read as follows. For Subject A, blood. Hazard Suit Mark II. Use standard biological waste kit. Human blood. Standard biological waste kit. For Subject A, secretion. Observe Class 2 extraterrestrial cleanup procedures. For Subject B, fluid. Immediately report sighting to the nearest administrator. Do not make contact. So yes, this proves that Subject A did exist within the game at one point. I mean, that might still exist within the game. I mean, I'm not really sure. I mean, it's difficult to have Subject B without Subject A, right? What, did you just skip A entirely? I mean, it might be like Sector 2, where, yes, it is confirmed that Sector 2 does exist within the Sectic lore, but that's not actually in the game, so... I don't know. But who could Subject A possibly be? Have we even seen them before? Well, due to this entry being on the last layer of the iceberg, I think you can assume that not many people have talked about this within the Sectic community before. However, I think that the most likely killer to fit the criteria of Subject A would probably be Alien. I mean, firstly, Subject A... Alien feels a bit too similar for this to be a mere coincidence. And of course we know from the case files that I mentioned earlier that Alien is the first ever killer of Area 51, at least in terms of the lore. We also know that Subject A must have been classified before Aberration within the story, because you know Subject A has gotta come before Subject B, it makes sense. Also, the choice of words used within the paper, secretion and extraterrestrial, don't they remind you of anyone? Of course, we know that Alien is an extraterrestrial. He was captured from a faraway planet as mentioned within other papers found around Area 51. That is a locked-in proven fact. And also the word secretion fits because, well, Alien spits acid. Secretion is basically just a fancy word for spitting. Once again, it lines up perfectly. The only thing that goes against this theory, though, in my opinion, is the comment on Subject A's supposed blood within Paper 7, as Alien simply doesn't have blood that he spews out when he dies, unless the acid is his blood or something. I mean, human blood doesn't exist in Sectic, so who knows? Well, I mean, adding blood to the alien would probably get the game taken down again if we've learned anything for the past few layers on this iceberg. But I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Subject A's secret identity indeed Alien, another killer we have in the game, or is it an entity we've never seen before? I'd love to get some feedback on this underrated mystery. The RPG was in the game. No, this isn't a hoax or a joke entry or anything like that. The RPG or rocket launcher was actually in Sanctic at one point, albeit all the way back in one of the first versions of the game. We know this because of two screenshots Homer provided to us a while back within the Sanctic Discord, in where a rocket launcher weapon can be seen very clearly in the radioactive area in place of where the ray gun spawns today. This was then replaced a few days later by a different RPG model, most likely because the old rocket launcher wasn't working correctly for whatever reason, and then later, of course, this newer RPG was replaced with the MP5K weapon, and it hasn't been seen in the game since. But yeah, that's about it really. We don't really have too much more information on the RPG because, well, it was added and removed so quickly during a time when, not many people were playing Sanctic. And again, we only really found out about this recently from Homer Mafia 1 himself. Hey, maybe like the zombie ball, Homer will add the RPG back into the game one day. Although I doubt it since, we already have many explodey weapons already in the game to replace the RPG, but who knows? It's certainly a possibility. Under the killer textures. This refers to a strange quirk that some of the killers have, or used to have within Sanctic, where due to the game not loading specific textures properly for whatever reason, specific killers can appear much differently. Leatherface appears with a weird-looking zombie face, Eyeless Jack appears with a different mask, most likely modeled after another creepypasta fittingly named Masky, Pinhead appears as... what? And finally, Ghostface can be seen with a pumpkin-styled cape, although for this last one in a recent update, this has since been patched. This is because, as many of you may know by now, a lot of the older Sanctic killer models were not made by Homer Mafia 1. No, they were just made by, bozos on the marketplace. They're free models, of course. And these free models... well, they were built using questionable methods, to say the least. Not by, the most amazing builders ever. Basically, what the original model creators did is that they most likely constructed the killers by taking assets from another already existing model made by somebody else. And instead of deleting the textures that were on the old model, they just slapped new images over them and called it a day. Yeah, I know, it's super lazy. But yeah, like I mentioned with Ghostface Pumpkin Cape being fixed, most of these texture bugs should get patched eventually since they are actually errors and mistakes and aren't supposed to be in the game. Sanctic 2017 hacking incident. Exploits within Sanctic are annoying, although certainly manageable. Sure, they might use speed hacks or fly exploits that make the